How to open a door with a button in Unreal Engine 5. First we're going to create the door blueprint, so go to the content browser, right click, go to blueprint class, then select actor. Call this BP_door. Open it, then click add and add a static mesh. This will be used for the frame of the door, so name this frame. So in the details panel, set the static mesh to your door frame asset. With the door frame selected, click add and add another static mesh. Call this left door. And set the static mesh to your left door asset. Next, right click and duplicate it. Call this one right door. Then set the static mesh to your right door asset. Depending on the assets you're using, you may need to move these doors around so that they fit perfectly within the frame. Once you have done this, open the event graph and delete these events. Then right click and add a custom event. Call this open door. This event will be triggered when the player interacts with a button. Drag off it and search for a timeline. This is used to smoothly move the doors to open them. Name it TL_open door. Double click on the timeline to open it. Then click add track and select add float track. Name this alpha. Then set the length of the track to something like 0.3 seconds. This is how long it will take for the doors to open once the button has been interacted with. Hold shift and left click on the graph to add a point. This will be used for the start position of our doors. So set the time to 0 and also set the value to 0. Next, hold shift and left click on the graph again to add another point. This will be used for the positions of the doors when they're open. So set the time to the full length of 0.3 seconds, then set the value to 1. Next, go back to the event graph, right click and search for a lerp node. This is used to interpolate the doors between two locations using the alpha from the timeline. So connect the two alpha pins, then set the B value to something like 100. This B value is the distance which the doors will move away from their original position. So we will test the doors later to see if we need to change this value. Next, drag in the left door, then drag off it again and search for set relative location. Connect this to the update pin of the timeline. Then right click on the new location pin and split the structure. This is because we only want the doors to move in one direction. In my case, I want the doors to move in the Y-axis. However, depending on how you have your doors set up, you might need to move them in the X-axis. You could even connect it to the Z pin if you wanted your door to open vertically. Next, we're going to do the same for the right door, so drag it in, then drag off and search for set relative location. Right click and split the pin structure. We want this door to move in the opposite direction to the left door, so drag off the lerp return value and search for a multiply, then set this value to -1. Now if we connect this to the Y pin, the right door will open in the opposite direction to the left door. Next we want to quickly test this, so right click on the graph and search for an event begin play. Then drag off and add a delay so that the door doesn't open straight away. I'm just going to set this to 1 second. Next, drag off and search for our open door event. Next, compile and save, then go back to the viewport. Open the content browser, then drag in the door blueprint. Now if we press play, the door should open after the 1 second delay. As you can see, the doors don't fully open, so we need to make a quick change to the door's open position. So I'm going to go back to the door blueprint and set the B value in the lerp to something more like 150. This value could be completely different depending on what door asset you're using. I've included a link to the one I'm using in the description below in case you want to use it yourself. Now the doors are opening fully, so we can move on to adding a button which we can use to open them. But first, quickly go back to the door blueprint and delete these nodes that we were using for testing. Before we create the button blueprint, we need to quickly make a blueprint interface which will be used to allow us to interact with it. So open the content browser, right click, go to Blueprint, then select Blueprint Interface. Name this BPI_interaction. Open it, then set the function name to interact. Then we can just compile and save and close it. Next we're going to create the button, so open the content browser, right click, go to Blueprint class, then select actor. Call this BP_button. Open it, then go to the viewport. Click add and add a static mesh. Name this button. Set the static mesh to your button asset. I'm going to quickly resize this one to make it a bit bigger. Next we need to give this blueprint our interact blueprint interface. So click class settings, then under implemented interfaces, search for our interact blueprint interface. Now that this is added, we can go to the event graph and delete these events. Next, right click on the interact interface, then select implement event. This will be triggered when the player interacts with the button. Next we need to add a variable so that we can store the door blueprint. This is so that we can communicate to it, telling it to open from the button. So click add variable and call it door. Set the type to our door blueprint. Make sure this is an object reference. Next, click the eye to make the variable public. This is so that we can link the button to the door within the game level. Next, drag in the door variable, then drag off it again and search for the open door event that we made. Connect this to the event interact. Next, compile and save, then go back to the viewport. Open the content browser, then drag the button blueprint into the level. Next we need to link the button to the door. So with the button selected, go to the details panel and look for our exposed door variable. Select the eyedropper, then click on the door in the level. These are now linked, so we can move on to the last step of making it so the player can interact with the button to open the door. First we need to add a new input, so go to the content browser and locate your input actions folder. Right click, then go to input, then input action. Call this IA_interact. This input should be set to digital bool. Save and close this, then go back to the content browser and locate your input mapping context. Open it, then expand this drop-down, then click the Add button. Go to the drop-down and select our Interact Input action. Expand this, then click the Keyboard button, then press the key on your keyboard that you want to use for this input. I'm going to use E. Now you can save and close this, then go back to the content browser and locate your player character blueprint. Open it, then in some space, right click and add our interact input. Expand this, then drag off the started pin and search for a multi-sphere trace for objects. This creates a sphere around the player which is able to detect if something nearby can be interacted with. We want this to spawn around the player, so drag off the started pin and search for a get actor location. Connect this to the end pin as well. Next, set the radius of the sphere to around 150. Drag off the object types and search for make array. Go to the drop-down and select World Dynamic, as this is the object type of our button. Next, set the debug type to for duration so that we can test that this is working. Compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play. If you press your interact key, a sphere trace will spawn around the player. If you go over to the button and press it, the sphere trace will turn green, which indicates it's the right object type. Now we're going to make it so when the button's interacted with, it sends a signal to the door, causing it to open. To do this, go back to the player character blueprint. Drag off this return value and search for a branch. Then drag off the out hits and search for a for each loop. Connect this to the true pin. This will cycle through all the objects that the sphere trace hits. Next, drag off the array element and search for a break hit result. Expand it, then drag off the hit actor and search for a does implement interface. Then go to the drop down and search for our interaction blueprint interface. Drag off the return value and search for a branch. Connect this to the for each loop. This system checks if the object we're hitting can be interacted with. Next, drag off the hit actor again and search for our interact blueprint interface event. Connect this to the true pin of the branch. Now if we compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, when we interact with our button, the door should now open. To hide the sphere trace, go back to the player character and set the draw debug type to none. Next, I'm going to quickly show you how you can open and close the door with the button. To do this, open the door blueprint, then right click on the graph and add a custom event. Name this Close Door. Connect the event to the reverse pin on the timeline. Then compile and save and go to the button blueprint. Here we want to drag off the interact event and search for a flip-flop. This node allows us to change the outcome each time we interact with the button. So we can leave the open door off the A pin, then drag off the door variable and search for the close door event, which we can then connect to the B pin. Now if we compile and save, then go back to the viewport and press play, we can interact with the button once to open it, then we can interact with it again to close it. If this video helped you, please feel free to like and subscribe or support me on Patreon so that I can keep making these Unreal Engine tutorials. Thank you so much for watching.